Let me start with something that might make you uncomfortable, but stay with me for 10 seconds. Being alone doesn't weaken you. It reveals you. It strips away the noise, the performance, the people-pleasing, the pretending. And if that scares you, it's not because solitude is dangerous. It's because truth is. I want you to understand this. The real reason being alone makes you stronger is not because you learn to be independent. That's surface level wisdom. The real reason is deeper and more confronting. When you're alone, there is no one left to regulate your emotions for you. No one to distract you from your grief. No one to validate your worth. And suddenly, you're face to face with the one relationship you've been avoiding your whole life, the relationship with yourself. And here's the hard part. At first, it hurts. Loneliness can feel like rejection, like abandonment, like proof that something is wrong with you. But that pain, that's not weakness. That's withdrawal. You're withdrawing from external validation, from chasing approval, from outsourcing your sense of safety to other people. Aloneness forces honesty. You begin to notice the stories you tell yourself in the quiet. You hear your inner critic without interruption. You feel emotions fully instead of numbing them with connection that doesn't nourish you. And that's when strength begins to form, not the loud kind, not the performative kind, but the quiet, grounded kind that doesn't beg to be chosen. Being alone teaches you how to sit with discomfort without abandoning yourself. And the moment you stop running from yourself, you stop being easy to break. When you are alone long enough, something unexpected happens. The silence starts talking back. And at first, it doesn't say kind things. It brings up the memories you buried, the moments you compromised yourself to be loved, the times you stayed too long, said yes, too quickly shrank too much. This is why so many people rush to fill the space with relationships, noise, scrolling, anything to avoid the reckoning. But here's the truth most people never tell you: strength is built in the moments you don't escape yourself. Being alone forces you to feel the full weight of your emotional history. There's no audience to perform resilience for. No one to reassure you that you're fine. You have to ask harder questions. Why did I tolerate that? Why did I ignore my intuition? Why did I confuse attention with love? And those questions don't come with easy answers. They come with grief, with anger, with regret. And yet, this is where your nervous system begins to recalibrate. You start learning how to self-soothe instead of self-abandon. You breathe through discomfort instead of attaching to people who recreate familiar pain. You begin to understand that loneliness isn't the absence of love, it's the absence of alignment. When you sit alone without running, your standards change. You stop craving intensity and start craving safety. You stop mistaking chaos for chemistry. You stop chasing people who only love you in pieces. And this shift is quiet, but it's radical, because the strongest people are not the ones who are never lonely. They are the ones who have been lonely and didn't let it harden them or hollow them out. They let it teach them discernment. They let it teach them boundaries. They let it teach them that connection should feel like expansion, not survival. Something shifts when you stop seeing being alone as a punishment and start recognizing it as a training ground. Alone time doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you choose. When no one is there to influence your decisions, you begin to notice how often you used to betray yourself just to keep the peace. You hear your own no, you feel your own yes. And that awareness, that's power. Being alone exposes your patterns. You start to see how quickly you once attached, how deeply you overgave, how often you tried to earn love by being useful, agreeable, indispensable in solitude. Those strategies don't work anymore. There's no one to perform for, no one to rescue. And without realizing it, you stop confusing self-sacrifice with connection. This is where boundaries are born, not from anger, not from resentment, but from clarity. You realize you don't need to explain your worth. You don't need to chase reciprocity. You don't need to convince anyone to stay. Because when you've sat with yourself long enough, abandonment loses its threat. You've already proven you can survive your own company. And here's the quiet miracle. The more secure you become alone, the less you tolerate relationships that destabilize you. You stop romanticizing emotional unavailability. You stop over-functioning in underperforming relationships. You stop calling anxiety butterflies and start calling it what it is, a warning. Strength grows when you trust yourself enough to walk away without a backup plan, when you no longer need someone else to make your life feel real. When connection becomes a choice, not a lifeline, that's when you realize being alone didn't empty you. It refined you. Being alone teaches you responsibility, the kind most people avoid. Not responsibility for other people's feelings, but responsibility for your own healing. When you're alone, there's no one left to blame for your emotional state. No partner to fix you. No friend to distract you. No relationship to hide inside. And that realization can feel heavy until it becomes freeing. You begin to understand that strength is not about control. It's about ownership. You own your triggers. You own your wounds. You own the ways you shut down, lash out, cling, or disappear. And instead of drowning in shame, you start meeting yourself with curiosity. You ask, what happened to me, instead of what's wrong with me. That shift alone changes everything. Solitude creates emotional literacy. You learn the difference between loneliness and grief, between sadness and fear, between intuition and anxiety. And once you can name what you feel, you can respond instead of react. That's real strength, the kind that doesn't explode or collapse under pressure. And here's the paradox. The more you learn to hold yourself, the less desperate you are for someone else to hold you. You stop seeking relationships to regulate your emotions. You stop needing constant reassurance to feel secure. You stop asking others to carry weight that was never theirs. Being alone doesn't make you selfish. It makes you self-aware, and self-aware people love differently. They don't attach to fill a void. They connect to share fullness. They don't need to be saved. They arrive whole. This is the moment you stop waiting for someone to complete you and start becoming someone who can't be easily destabilized. Being alone teaches you patience with yourself, and that might be the most underrated form of strength there is. When you're no longer rushing to be chosen, you stop rushing your healing. You stop demanding that your pain resolve on someone else's timeline. You learn how to move slowly without panicking, how to pause without feeling left behind. Aloneness shows you how much of your life was driven by urgency, the urgency to be loved, to be seen, to matter. And when that urgency fades, something steadier takes its place. You begin to trust that what is meant for you will not require self-erasure. You begin to understand that forcing connection is a form of self-betrayal. In solitude, you practice staying with difficult emotions, staying with unanswered questions, staying when there's no immediate reward. And every time you do, you build evidence inside yourself that you are capable of endurance. Not the kind that tolerates suffering endlessly, but the kind that knows when to wait and when to walk away. You also start noticing how regulated you become. Your nervous system stops living in constant anticipation, waiting for texts, tone shifts, emotional temperature changes. Peace stops feeling boring and starts feeling safe. And safety becomes non-negotiable. This is where your confidence changes texture. It's no longer loud or defensive. It doesn't need to announce itself. It's quiet, embodied, unshakable. You don't need to prove your value because you've already experienced it. Alone in the silence when no one was watching. That strength, the kind that doesn't rush love and doesn't fear waiting for it. Being alone rewires your definition of connection. You stop believing that love has to hurt to be real. You stop equating longing with depth. In solitude, you finally feel the difference between missing someone and missing yourself. And that realization can be sobering. You begin to notice how often you once confused attachment with intimacy, how you tolerated inconsistency because it kept you emotionally activated, how you mistook unpredictability for passion. Alone, your body settles, your breath deepens, and from that calm, you realize something radical. Peace is not boring, it's honest. This is where discernment sharpens. You no longer fall for potential. You no longer bond over shared wounds. You stop romanticizing emotional unavailability because you've felt what availability feels like inside your own body. You've learned how to show up for yourself consistently, and suddenly inconsistency in others feels loud. Being alone also teaches you how to grieve properly. Not just people, but versions of yourself you had to let go of, the one who hoped harder, tried longer, stayed quieter. And in that grief, you reclaim energy that was tied up in proving, fixing, waiting. This is strength most people never develop because they never pause long enough to feel the loss. But you did. And because you did, you don't reach for connection out of hunger anymore. You reach out of intention. Love stops being something you chase. It becomes something you recognize. Being alone teaches you how to trust yourself again. Not the surface level trust of positive affirmations, but the deep earned trust that comes from watching yourself survive what you once thought would break you. You remember the nights you didn't think you'd get through. And yet, you did. Alone, breathing, still standing. This is where self-respect stops being a concept and starts being a practice. You notice how quickly you now step back when something feels off. You don't override your intuition anymore. You don't negotiate with red flags. You don't explain away discomfort just to keep the connection alive, because when you've learned to be alone, fear loses its leverage. You also stop oversharing your pain to be understood. You become selective, grounded. You realize not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Privacy stops feeling like isolation and starts feeling like protection. That discernment is strength. Being alone teaches you that your worth is not measured by how needed you are. You don't have to exhaust yourself to be valuable. You don't have to be the emotional glue holding everything together. You can rest and still matter. And here's the quiet shift. You start living from alignment instead of approval. Your choices feel cleaner. Your energy feels contained. You don't abandon yourself to belong anymore. You belong to yourself first. This is what people mean when they say solitude changes you. It doesn't make you colder. It makes you clearer. Being alone teaches you restraint, and restraint is a form of power most people never learn. You stop reacting immediately. You stop chasing closure. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Silence becomes a choice, not a collapse. And that choice changes how others experience you. You begin to notice that you no longer feel the need to correct every narrative about you. You don't rush to defend your character. You don't need to be seen accurately by everyone, because when you truly know yourself, being misjudged is uncomfortable, but no longer destabilizing. That's strength. Aloneness also sharpens your sense of timing. You learn when to speak and when to wait, when to lean in and when to step back. You stop forcing outcomes. You allow things to reveal themselves, and in that waiting, truth rises. People show you who they are without you having to interrogate them. Situations resolve themselves without you overextending. This is where dignity grows. You don't beg for clarity. You don't bargain for effort. You don't stay where your presence is optional, not because you're hardened, but because you've learned what it costs to abandon yourself. Being alone doesn't make you passive. It makes you precise. Your yes carries weight. Your no is clean. Your energy is no longer scattered across people and places that cannot meet you. And when you move like that, grounded, intentional, self-held, strength stops being something you try to embody. It becomes something others feel in your absence. Being alone teaches you humility in a powerful way. You realize you are not invincible, and you no longer need to pretend that you are. You've felt the ache. You've faced the emptiness. You've sat with the longing without letting it turn you reckless. And because of that, your strength is no longer brittle. It bends. It breathes. It lasts. You stop measuring your life by milestones that impress other people. You stop rushing to arrive. Alone, you discover that meaning is built in the small, unglamorous moments, making yourself dinner, keeping promises to yourself, choosing rest over chaos, truth over fantasy. This kind of strength isn't cinematic. It's sustainable. You also become deeply compassionate, not just toward others, but toward yourself. You understand how easy it is to reach for connection when you're hurting. You understand why people cling, why they settle, why they stay too long. And instead of judging, you choose differently. That's wisdom born from lived experience. Being alone teaches you that longing is not a flaw. It's a signal that you are human, wired for connection, capable of depth. But now you don't let longing drive the car. You let it sit in the passenger seat. You stay in control, and this is the final preparation, because solitude doesn't isolate you from love. It prepares you for it. It clears out the neediness. It steadies your nervous system. It makes space for connection that is mutual, calm, and real. You are no longer afraid of being alone, and that's how you know you're ready for what comes next.